Welcome, friends of Julian Assange. My name is Jeff Mackler, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar with Alice Walker, Joe Lombardo, Nathan Fuller, and at the last second, we secured a message from the world's most famous political prisoner, Mumia Abu-Jamal. This webinar in defense of Julian Assange and free speech is brought to you by the Assange Defense Committee, the Courage Foundation, which defends whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, and Julian Assange, and by the United National Anti-War Coalition. I'm going to introduce our speakers briefly, and then we'll proceed in a predetermined order. Our first speaker is Nathan Fuller. He's the director of the Courage Foundation. He's based on the East Coast, and he has been central in organizing the events for the freedom of Julian Assange. Nathan, let's begin with an update on the case from you.
Great, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate UNAC joining along with Courage and Assange Defense here. Just a very quick overview for those who are very new to the case. Julian Assange is the founder of WikiLeaks, currently imprisoned in Britain because he's wanted for because the US wants to extradite him, where they want to charge him for the 2010 publication of Iraq war logs, Afghanistan war logs, and State Department cables, along with Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs. Assange has been charged under the Espionage Act, unprecedented use of this Espionage Act for publishing. This would set a precedent, a landmark First Amendment case that would essentially erode the First Amendment's protection of the right to publish. Assange has been fighting extradition in the UK. And actually, after his September 2020 hearing, the judge in the UK blocked his extradition, declined to extradite him from the UK to the US because on medical grounds, basically finding that it would be oppressive and unjust because it's a suicide risk, given how dangerous and poor the US prison conditions would be. He would be guaranteed a conviction, experts testified. He would be guaranteed to be sent into solitary confinement, lacking adequate mental health care. It was just a real damning condemnation of the US prison system. However, the US is appealing that decision, and so that appeals process is underway in the UK now. The district court level blocked the extradition, and now the High Court has to hear that case. The High Court, the US has appealed, the defense is going to respond, and now the High Court has to decide whether to hear that appeal. It's expected that they will decide to hear that appeal and give oral arguments, and that can happen in the next couple of months. We want to call on the US, however, to drop the charges at any moment, because while this process is underway in the UK, the US is the one calling the shots. The US can drop the charges, can drop this prosecution at any moment that it wants. It was the Trump administration's Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions and William Barr and Mike Pompeo who initiated this prosecution after the Obama administration had declined to prosecute. But now the question is whether the new Biden administration is going to keep up the case. They have filed their appeal, but the Attorney General in the new Justice Department has not yet been confirmed. His confirmation hearing actually just started today. The vote will be next week. And we're hoping to talk to him and get him to have a new look at the case and decide that this prosecution is a dangerous threat to the First Amendment and needs to be dropped immediately. So that's why we started the Assange Defense Committee. That's why we're organizing support throughout the US. There are support groups around the world, but we're organizing here in the US because we want to make clear to the new administration that we oppose this threat to the First Amendment. So you can check out assangedefense.org to learn more about what we're doing. We have chapters in major cities across the country, from San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and New York. Los Angeles. We're trying to connect people who oppose this prosecution, who support the right to publish, and consequently the public's right to know, who support this kind of investigative journalism. So please get in touch at AssangeDefense.org. You can find more ways to contribute, either joining a chapter near you, donating if you can't spend the time, but just get in touch and we'd be glad to have your support. So thank you, Jeff and UNAC for helping put this event together.
My pleasure. And thank you, Nathan, for your good work. One day we will all get together and celebrate Julian's freedom. That will be a dinner on me. I'm proud to present our next speaker. Alice Walker is the co-national chair of AssangeDefense.org, along with Noam Chomsky and Dan Ellsberg. She is a renowned Pulitzer Prize novelist, magnificent poet, and lifelong social justice activist. Alice, thanks for being with us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you. I'm just totally thrilled. I wanted to send metta to Julian because I want to lift this struggle straight to the heart. I don't know how many of you understand anything about sending metta, but it's a Buddhist way of sending loving kindness. And usually there are 4 types of people that you need to send loving kindness to: someone that we feel neutral about, someone we care about, someone who is really hard to bear, and someone we consider a benefactor. And I consider Julian Assange a benefactor to humanity. And I wish to send metta, loving kindness, to him today. Julian Assange, for all that you have risked by your courage and love of us, and for the sake of our planet and all humanity, I offer our collective gratitude and our energetic blessing of you. May you be free. May you be happy. May you be at peace. May your soul and your body be at rest. May your body be held as sacred by all those who have imprisoned you. May you know we are grateful for you, for your courage, obviously rooted in love of us, as a brother and as a journalist. We respect, honor, and love you, Julian. So I want to just say how incredibly horrible, it has been to see this man locked up, not just recently, but also all those years in London. I went to visit him there, and it was hard to conceive, even standing there, that humanity had managed to get this courageous being in that small space for so many years, fearing for his life, and fearing for his life partly because he risked his life for us, so that we would have a clue about what is happening in our world, because so often we have no clue. Things are done and we watch, the madness and the disaster and have no idea how it's connected to anything. I mean, it's just like, happening. And I want very much for us to understand and to feel, not just think about. I want us to feel what it must be like to go out on that limb, out there with Manning, out there with some of the people, other people that we have known and have lost. We were also out there on that limb with Julian. So I'm very grateful actually to be able, still around, to be able to make a comment on this man's situation, which I believe collectively we have a duty to change. We may not agree with, everything, and whoever does. We may not like this or that, whoever does. It's not about, liking. It's about honoring someone who has stood up for our right to know what is happening to our own lives. And why at this point, we look at the planet, so much of it ruined by war and the collective attitude of just indifference. In fact, indifference is actually a milder form of the disease, that is destroying cultures and people in the planet, starving children, starving mothers, making people homeless. Who was going to tell us about all this? So Julian, Manning, thank you so much. And the least that we can do, it seems to me, is get you out of prison. And there are ways to do that. I mean, I don't know how to do it except by speaking, writing, thinking. But collectively, where is our collective heart? That is what we need. We need to put in action our collective heart and our understanding of where we are as a planet. And we need to get Julian out of that prison and back with his children and his partner. That's the human thing to do. I mean, how could you not see that that is absolutely what humanity demands of us? And if we can't do that, I'm afraid but we won't go there. We just say thank you very much for everybody who stands up for Julian's release from prison, to get back to his children and his partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. We just received messages. Thank you so much, Alice. Beautiful thoughts and words for Julian. Anne Wright from Trip to Gaza and Other Adventures. And also from Dennis Bernstein. Thank you, Alice, Jeff, and the rest of you who care enough to speak out. I will play this on Flashpoints later this week. May you all be well. Dennis from Flashpoints, KPFA, and the Flashpoints team. We're in good company today.
Yeah, I want to note, especially nice to see a message from Anne Wright, the former State Department official who spoke out against the Iraq War and has long been just a great advocate for Chelsea Manning, Assange, oppressed people everywhere. So thanks, Anne, and glad to have your support.
Our next speaker is an old friend who has spent 40 years, most of it on death row, in prison, an innocent political prisoner framed up by a racist Philadelphia police department. It's very difficult to get a message from Mumia Abu-Jamal. And after trying for 2 weeks, he just tuned in to us yesterday and gave us his magnificent greeting, which I'm sure you'll all want to talk about. Let's hear directly from Mumia Abu-Jamal, the author of 10 books on social justice, on history, and on the struggle of humanity for a better world. His freedom, like Julian's, is a top priority for everyone who loves justice and who hates a racist prison industrial complex that sends so many young people of color to imprisoned on frame-up charges or as a result of this unjust world. Let's hear from Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Julian Assange's gift. Julian Assange, one of the founders of the internet. Julian Assange's gift. Julian Assange, one of the founders of the internet transparency outfit WikiLeaks, is widely regarded by the corporate press as an enemy. Why? I believe the answer can be gleaned by history of journalistic breakthroughs that came not from the established press, but through alternative and underground presses. At the height of the Black liberation struggles of the 1960s, Liberation News Service produced film interviews with people like Huey P. Newton, one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party. It was a powerful breakthrough. During the so-called war on drugs, a little-known journalist named Gary Webb from a tiny West Coast newspaper, the San Jose Mercury News, broke the story of CIA drug running to black gangsters in Cali. Webb won a Pulitzer, and then came the counterattack. The big news guns, big papers in New York, Washington, and LA attacked his reporting. Mercury cut him loose, and thereafter, news of an alleged suicide came. What does this tell us? That's what new news sources break through against the grain of the establishment. Now think back to the Iraq War. Remember? Weapons of mass destruction. How about Dick Cheney's predictions that they'll greet us as liberators? Julian's WikiLeaks broke through the state's lies like a battering ram. And then WikiLeaks released a video of a 2007 shoot-up of Iraqi civilians by U.S. troops in an AH Apache helicopter gunship. The accompanying audio of laughter and guffaws as they shoot civilians.
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
Told a truth that only WikiLeaks could tell. In this wise, Assange and his pals at WikiLeaks showed the world the real face of war. He showed the face of the U.S. empire. And he's been treated like an enemy ever since. He broke through. And the fiends of corporate media, like the state itself, will never forgive him. From Imprisoned Nation, this is Mumia Abu Jamal. Julian Assange's gift. Julian Assange, one of the founders of the internet transparency outfit WikiLeaks, is widely regarded by the corporate press as an enemy.
Away. He exposed the U.S. illegal aid to the Contras by bringing CIA crack cocaine into the United States for sale in Los Angeles, and they used the proceeds to fund an illegal war against the Nicaraguans that killed 50,000 people. The war in Iraq that was exposed so magnificently in detail by Julian Assange's war logs took the lives of 1.5 million Iraqis. And the war, the Contra War, the illegal war that was used by the United States to bring down, to fund the Nicaraguan country, included providing arms to Saddam Hussein's government for an 8-year US-backed war that took the lives of 1 million Iranians and 800,000 Iraqis. That's what didn't come out in detail in Contragate. We're getting magnificent messages from Bill Ayers in Chicago, from Solidarity from London, Solidarity from Chicago, Bill Ayers, Diana Randall, also in London, Free Julian and End This Terrible Injustice. Francis Goff, You Are Not Alone, But Have Peace of Mind. Stephanie and panelists, Free Julian, Solidarity from New Zealand. Anne Wright again, thanks Nathan. We must support all the truth tellers, especially those in prison, about to be in prison, or those who wonder if they may go to prison for speaking out against criminal actions of the government. From Alexis Hall, Free Julian, Solidarity from CUNY, CUNY students. From Canada, Miva Devoto, Solidarity. And the messages go on and on. Our next speaker is a lifelong anti-war activist, Joe Lombardo. 10 years, he was one of the founders of United National Anti-War Coalition. a coalition that organized the largest anti-war conference in the nation's history at that time, 800 people in Albany, New York. An anti-war fighter whose basic idea is no to all US wars and interventions, bring the troops home, no to the war against working people at home. It's my pleasure to introduce Joe Lombardo.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to everybody who's joined this webinar on a weekday afternoon. And I'm seeing a number of my friends and fellow anti-war activists who have been making comments, such as Ann Wright and Patrick McCann and a number of others. And thank you all for being here and supporting the case of Julian Assange. The case of Julian Assange is very important for the anti-war movement and for UNAC in particular. At our founding conference in 2010 that Jeff just mentioned, we showed the collateral murder video released by WikiLeaks that showed war crimes committed by the United States. The US classified the video and then prosecuted Chelsea Manning, claiming she provided this classified information to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. There was no reason for the US to classify the video, except that it showed a war crime, one of many that the US has committed during its numerous wars. There were no secret codes or information on troop maneuvers or other information that might justify having the material classified, only evidence of war crimes. Today, the US routinely classifies information that they do not want us to know about. At the 2010 UNAC conference, the video was presented by Ethan McCord, who was a US soldier on the ground when the US shot and killed civilians, reporters, and first responders from the helicopter as depicted in the collateral murder video. McCord described the site after the killing. He described how he took two half-dead children from a car that was shot up and how he removed a piece of glass from the eye of a small girl whose father, the driver of the car, had been killed, shot and killed. I have that video and I'll put it in the chat after I speak, and maybe you can copy the link and take a look at it and hear what Ethan McCord had to say at that time. Ann Wright, who's on here, was also at that conference, I remember. It is said that the first victim of war is the truth. This is certainly true of the Iraq War. The entire thing was based on the lie that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But it was also a war where the US conducted a secondary war against any form of independent journalism. The military urged that journalists be embedded with them so the US military could control where they go and what they see and control the narrative that they would report. All of the US corporate media went along with this. They embedded with the military and only told the State Department's version of what happened in that war. To underscore their insistence on no independent journalism, when the US military entered Baghdad, they sent tanks to the Palestine Hotel where journalists from other countries who did not embed with the US military were staying, and they fired their cannons on the hotel, killing some Spanish journalists. Instead of showing solidarity with their fellow journalists, National Public Radio News editorialized that if journalists did not want to be fired on, they should have embedded with the US military. During that period, NPR News also reported on a Washington, D.C. demonstration against the war that police estimated at 100,000 people. NPR used the headline, "Dozens March in Washington Against the War." To get around the corporate media censorship, most of our movement has turned to social media. But all social media is privately owned, and decisions on what can be displayed or what can be said or not is totally up to the owners of the platforms. All of us in the progressive movement, including UNAC, have been censored on these platforms. We can call this the privatization of freedom of speech in the United States. This is the context in which Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have been attacked. They want to make the point that if you report the facts and they don't, and they conflict with the narrative of the US State Department, you can be prosecuted. This is an attack on all journalism and freedom of speech. We will be unable to speak against the crimes of the United States and other governments if this is allowed to happen. This is what is at stake in the case of Julian Assange. So, as was mentioned, the United States wants to have Julian Assange extradited back to the US. Julian Assange is not a US citizen. They want to hold him in prison for up to 150 years because he had the audacity to reveal US war crimes. However, as we know, the judge in Britain refused to extradite him, correctly claiming that his life would be in danger in a US prison. It is well known throughout the world that the US so-called justice system is unjust and draconian. We have one of the few systems that still has the death penalty. The US has less than 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. As we speak, there are as many as 100,000 people in the United States who are being held in solitary confinement. According to the UN Special Rapporteur Juan Mendez, more than 15 days in solitary confinement is torture. Yet the US has kept people in solitary confinement continuously for decades. We've heard from Mumia today, Mumia Abu Jamal. They want to do to Julian Assange what they are doing to Mumia. It is something we can't accept and we must oppose. Julian is suffering in perhaps the worst prison in the UK, not because they are holding him for a crime that he committed there, but because they are holding him to see if the US can make a case to extradite him, to have him extradited. The US has pushed for his extradition under both Democratic and Republican administrations. For his sake, for our sake, and for Pete's sake, let's free Julian Assange. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe Lombardo, and thanks to UNEC. We have some more inspiring messages that I'm compelled to read. From Adrian Pearl, solidarity from Brooklyn, and thank you all from the bottom of my heart, free Assange and free Mumia. From Stephanie to the panelists and attendees, I agree with the comments that were just read online. Alice Walker is so inspiring. From Patricia Gracian, thank you, Alice Walker, for speaking to us. Pat in San Diego. Ann Wright, from Stephanie, Ann Wright is a hero for refusing to be part of the illegal Iraq war. From Vincent Stefano, I have taken this webinar as an opportunity to call my senators, yet again, for them to immediately and unconditionally drop all charges against Julian and encourage you all to do likewise. It will only be through our collective action that we can get out our elected leaders to act to protect our right to have a free and open press. From Al Gladkowski, thank you for putting this program together, Free Julian Assange. From Francis Gulf, keep contacting the new Attorney General. From Deepat Driver, thank you, Mumia, for your solidarity with Julian and others. And from Ann Wright, one more time, Mumia broke the story on police brutality and corruption in Philadelphia and was framed by the very police in retaliation. From Marjorie Stamberg, is there a transcript of Mumia's powerful statement? Yes, we will have one from Nathan. So with that, let's go back to our panel. I'm going to call on for additional remarks by Alice, then Joe, then Nathan, and we'll see where we go from there. Alice, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, just that I believe we are very lucky in a way that he's alive. For many of us on this panel, we've lost so many people who stood So we are grateful and we're thankful that he is still alive. And with that as our encouragement, I think we can continue to stand together and do whatever we can to free him. This is someone who has stood up for us, and we can stand up for him.
Thanks, Alice. Joe? You're on mute, Joe.
Okay, sorry. You can hear me now, I hope. First of all, I notice Al and Patrick and other friends from Veterans for Peace. It's very important that they're here. And it's important that all of us, no matter what movement we're in, whether it's the movement for Black Lives, the peace movement, any social justice movement at all, that we all come behind Julian Assange. Our movements, our primary thing that we have to do is defend our own people, is defend the people that stand up as we all are for social justice. It's almost a calling, you know. It's something that we need to be doing, and a movement is not worth its salt if it can't defend its own members and own supporters. So I would encourage anybody, everybody, to, regardless of what your main activity is today, what movements you're involved in, to get involved with the case for Julian Assange. We have to win this case. He cannot be extradited to the United States. It will be death for Julian. His health has been really damaged by the prison he's been in the UK. And it's time that we really strongly do something in the United States to support him.
Thanks again, Joe. We have some additional incredible messages. Here's one from one of the world's most prominent Mumia Abu-Jamal activists, Julia Wright, who is the son of the famed author Richard Wright, author of Black Boy, decades and decades ago. Says Julia, Mumia broke the story on police brutality and corruption in Philadelphia and was framed by the very police in retaliation. Another message from Anne Wright. Wow, this is one voice in regard to Mumia you recognize immediately. Thanks to all your work, Mumia does from inside prison. Makes the rest of us look like slackers considering all the resources we have each day and what we should be doing on so many different fronts. From Michael Clare, greetings from Peace and Neutrality, from the Peace and Neutrality Alliance in Ireland. From Alice Stroom, thanks for all your good work, free Julian. From Magdalena Lewis, thank you, Mumia, for your guidance and strength. The people will fight for liberation for you and all political prisoners. Love from Denver, Colorado. From Ann Batiza, thank you for your voices. Julian's freedom, our right to know what our government does in our name. Again, from Deepa Driver, spot on. Classification is being used to hide criminality, corruption, and things that are embarrassing for the powers that be. Anne Conway, solidarity from the group Free Assange Ireland. Julian will be free. Anne in Dublin. From Patrick McCain, yes, big up Ethan McCord's testimony. Peter Thiel, free Julian Assange, solidarity from Berlin, Germany. And I have 24 additional messages. I don't think we'll have time, but there are many. So with that, Nathan, closing remarks.
Yeah, it's great to see so many messages from all around the country, all around the world, and it shows how universal, how international this issue is. Some people in the US have been able to kind of put it out of their minds, thinking this is just a UK matter. even though it's the US government calling the shots. So it's really great to see internationally people who advocate against wars are realizing that Assange's work is really vital to their work as well. Assange said at an anti-war rally against the Afghanistan war back in 2011, he gave a speech in London and said that if war can be started by truth, then maybe peace can be, if war can be started with lies, maybe peace can be started with truth. And so, accountability is his goal and transparency is the method. And so I really am glad to see other people recognize the interconnection of these issues. I've also put in the chat, and I'll put on social media underneath this event other ways that you can get involved. AssangeDefense.org, again, is the best place for US activists as we're trying to organize US support globally. We can also go to defend.wikileaks.org. And as Jeff asked me to plug a donate link, so I'll say defend.wikileaks.org/donate is where you can contribute there. I'll also note that we've just been doing a lot of these different events to talk about different aspects of the case. We're going to have more events coming up. This Saturday, there's another event to commemorate 9 years since the WikiLeaks publication of the Stratfor leaks. Not discussed quite as much because they were not in the prosecution against him, in the indictment against him, but it was the publication of the internal files of a private intelligence firm that basically spied on activists on behalf of corporations. And so this is another way in which WikiLeaks gives us a window into the world of the powerful that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's Saturday. I put the event info in the chat. You can check it out. But just get involved. Don't feel like you can't do anything. If you can't donate, you can join our local branch. You can tell your senator that you want this prosecution to be dropped. There are lots of ways you can get involved. You can do something. So thank you for watching and joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan. A few more messages from Rex Dean. Alice Walker hosted my Jazz for Life benefit at Harvard for Oxfam in the 1980s. Remember that, Alice?
Not really, but I'm glad I was there.
And so I have an excuse to share today's conversation with my college class Facebook group in hopes that classmate Tony Blinken will see it. And well, the messages go on and on and on and on. Here's a long message, which is from a dear friend, Cliff Connor in New York. He's the author of The People's History of Science. On Monday, February 8th, a coalition of 24 leading civil liberties organizations issued a powerful call to the new administration to drop the Assange prosecution altogether. The ACLU, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Center for Constitutional Rights, the Press Freedom Defense Fund, Reporters Without Borders, and the Knight First Amendment Institute were among the signatories. We must all take their call to scandalize the Biden administration for pursuing the Trump administration's vendetta against Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange, Cliff and Marouche Connor. We have endless messages. I forgot to identify myself. I'm Jeff Mackler. I'm the director of the Mobilization to Free Mumia Abu-Jamal on the West Coast. I'm the founder and administrative committee member of the United National Anti-War Coalition, and I am proud to be on the steering committee of the AssangeDefense.org. You can check AssangeDefense.org, immediately donate and contribute. You can check UNACpeace.org to get involved in the anti-war movement. Join us, spread the word, be part of a team, a united front effort to free Julian Assange, to bring him home, and to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. What a victory lies ahead of us. Let's continue the struggle. Thank you, panelists, dear Alice Walker, Joe Lombardo, Mumia Abu Jamal, and Nathan Fuller. I'm honored to be with you. I think we've spent a productive 50 minutes together. Let's call it a day.
Thank you, Jeff. Really
One
appreciate
might
it.
think that that should lead us to a state of despair. It should lead us also to an optimistic understanding, because if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth.